Welcome to All Things in the Name of Love. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks. Welcome to another episode of All Things in the Name of Love. Today I have with me Carolina Gutierrez, who, I already feel her energy. She's a beautiful, beautiful person. And her bio, I love this. You're a business unicorn, which I get, founder, serial entrepreneur, mental health advocate, podcast host, and counselor. Every step you take in life has been led by intuition, and you were formerly educated in social work, and so your entire life has been informed by healing, and I love that. And I love that you're intuitive and you help people intuitively get into their best state for their business, because I know that's a thing, because it's a thing.
Mhm.
Uh, I've, I thought when I was a historian, like I was supposed to be a consultant. I followed my intuition to an extent, but it was still very left-brained. And so I want to thank you for the work you do in the world, first and foremost. And
Oh,
then,
wow. Thank you.
yeah, and then I want to thank you for joining me. And I'm just so excited to have this conversation.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, Sophia. See where this time takes us.
Yeah. So tell me about, like, yes, you like innately, I feel, you've had this call to be working in healthcare and healing since like early.
So, something that I didn't used to put in my bio, I put in it now, but I've been a medium since I was 4. I can recall the first time hearing spirit when I was 4 years old and not understanding.
Mhm.
Everybody thinks that people with these gifts, you know what to do with them from day one, and it's absolutely,
Yeah,
it
not at
could not
all.
be further from the truth, right? So, and I was not raised in a family that would have encouraged it, supported it, or
Smiling
been
because I'm right there
a
with you.
good time. Yeah, it wouldn't have been a good time, and I knew that very early on. But did I know it was spirit speaking to me when I was 4? No, but I remember very, very clearly how it showed up, how I knew this was an external voice, the circumstances that kind of brought that on. And I can look back at it now and recognize what it was. I didn't for many, like it was well into my mid to late 20s until I realized what happened back when I was 4
Yeah.
years old.
No, I totally get that because I was super spirited. I astral travel. I remember tying myself to the bed and traveling
Oh, wow.
and
Wow.
then coming back. Like I
That's
don't,
awesome.
yeah, it was like really
Taking
cool.
safety precautions.
I know, like this is my little Girl Scout. But yeah, like that whole like nobody to relate with at all. And my experience got so, I grew up in Connecticut, in Fairfield County, Connecticut in the 70s. So like I had an experience when my grandpa died where everything just changed in my life, and it got so dramatic that I consciously chose to cut the connection off
Yeah.
because it was too much.
Yeah, for sure.
So did you feel anything like that, or was it like the slow, just like closing in?
So, with my training, with my education, under different circumstances, I would have probably been diagnosed schizophrenic, right?
Okay,
Because I hear voices. Like that is my main gift.
okay,
There's other gifts now that, as I've practiced this for decades now, they've come online. But very firstly, how it showed up was voices. But they've always been positive. Thank God. Like I'm very grateful for that every single day I knock on wood because I've worked with people where that's not the case, right? And for some, um, that that gift is almost a haunting. Now, is it comfortable all the time? It isn't. It's fine now, but it took me a while to very much adjust. And, you know, um, just because you have this, it doesn't excuse you or remove you from the everyday situations that we all are forced to live, right? Whether it's in childhood or that awkwardness of growing up or even adulting, right? So do I did I understand it? It wasn't until I was in my early 20s that I've spoken about this quite a bit on other podcasts where I was at a workshop and there was a medium there and we were all sitting around at lunch, kind of just talking to her and kind of getting to know her and getting kind of little snippets of readings. And she turns around at me and she goes, honey, you're more intuitive than I am. Why aren't you doing this for a living? And I was like, excuse me,
Oh,
what are you talking about?
wow.
Right. And it really was this pin that dropped in my life that changed my perspective. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, the past 20 plus years made sense because there were so many instances where it showed up
Mhm.
and I couldn't figure it out, right? It's kind of like it's right there, right in front of you, right in
Right,
your
right.
nose. But you're like, who stepped on poo? Right? And you're the one carrying all that. So yeah, it was an interesting experience.
Yeah, I've had two friends recently tell me like, you are so intuitive. I'm like, I am? Because I don't know. I just am, right? You know, you don't see it because you just are. I think baking is super easy. I've been doing it since I was 4.
Right, right.
So like it's just
Yeah.
these natural gifts that we don't even see that other people are like, how do you even do that? And you're like, well, it's super like because it's just innate.
Yeah. I remember after she told me that, and it was kind of like, I remember my guides turning around and being like, great, now you understand. Now it's time to get to work. And all of a sudden it was like, oh my
Wow.
gosh. And I remember at the time, I don't know if it's still going on. I know it was in the States a bit, but there was something called the Learning Annex. And it would be like little workshops that they would put on about all these different topics. And I remember going, and it was a medical intuitive. It was the only one like kind of
Mhm.
esoteric or metaphysical. And so I'm sitting in the room and I came in late. I'm the youngest in the room. And she's talking about how do you develop it, you know, how it shows up, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, how do you turn it off? And right, everybody kind of, and everybody in the room was like, oh, what? And I was like, it's a lot, you know, like
Yeah.
I want it on all the time, right? So luckily I've learned to manage it a bit better, but definitely it was something that I don't know for everyone else, but I wasn't born with a user guide. I was born with guides that would teach me, but again, your guides teach you in a very interesting way, and they
Right.
don't always give you all the answers right off the bat,
Oh
and
yeah.
you got to work for your stuff, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Like I knew when I was little, like I had very profound connections with animals when I was very little. I knew I was going to be a doctor. I did not want to cut anyone open. So I'm like, okay, what
Mm.
subject can I handle long enough to get a PhD in? And it was history because I love studying technology and people and how that interaction is. So that's what I focused on, but that was not my calling. I didn't know body talk existed.
Oh, right,
Like
right.
it was developed in Australia in the 1980s prior to like any decent internet. And I'm in Connecticut and Maine. So it's like it just wasn't aligned at the time. I didn't even learn about it until 2011. So that was well after I finished all of the third dimensional constructs of what education is.
You know, and sometimes I think, you know, as I work with people and as I combine, you know, my studies with my spirituality, because that's kind of where I'm at with that right now. Um, I recognize that these are all arbitrary timelines that we kind of make up in our head, right? And as much as I would like to think, oh, if I had known when I was 4, what I
Right,
found out when I was 20, how different my life would be. And it's like, that's not necessarily true, right? We all
right.
have this kind of unique recipe or formula
Mhm.
for our particular life lessons and fate or destiny. I know that for
Yeah,
New Age circles, that can be a little bit of a dirty word, but I think it's a combination, right, of
right.
things that we can absolutely control and work
Mhm.
with. And then there's other things that we're constantly brushing up against because they're part of
Yeah.
big lessons in this journey of ours.
Oh yeah. That I know. I know. I've recently had a release of an old set of patterns and that culminated
Ooh,
in one relationship.
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. It's like I like when I saw it actually complete, I was like, wow, I'm actually done with it. I'm done with people pleasing. I'm done with people trying to control me. I'm done with narcissism. I'm done with what was the last one? Codependency. Like it was all represented in this one piece.
Yes,
And I'm like,
yes, good for
so
you.
because it's been so many lessons that I've had to learn of like how to stand in my own sovereignty, how to like self-care, how to not like give myself away, and actually, intentionally call all of my energy back from all the people I've given it away to unconsciously.
Yeah.
And that was
Yeah.
like, oh, I can do that. And
Again, it's that little perspective that all of a sudden something shifts and you're
uh,
able to do something that you've been working for a really long time, and it makes sense now finally, right?
yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but like there's some things that just you peel the layer off and you're like, oh, I'm done. And then there's another layer. And
There's always another layer. Just get the, like, let's like in my opinion, there's always another layer, and the sooner that we can come to terms with that and
mm,
welcome it, because I trust me, it took me a long, it was groaning. It was like, oh God, more, really, this isn't done. Like, really, this feels like this is the catch-all, and this is and
mhm.
it's not like that.
No, although this one definitely feels like this, it was such a neutral energy. I was like, ooh, I don't like that. 'Cause I've never had like it was flat out, like didn't even feel the energy of another that particular person. Like there was, I'm like, ooh,
Yeah.
did I
It's
graduate?
like you feel, it's almost like that Band-Aid being ripped off. You feel like it's finally come off and you're like,
Yeah,
now
yeah.
the
And
sun can hit it.
I haven't ever had that before, so I was like, this is so cool because like now my meditations are deeper. Um,
It's
like
like all the work that you've done comes together,
yeah.
and has the impact that you've been looking for. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Doesn't mean I don't have other things to clear. It just means like this big chunk of me is like I'm done with the lessons on that. So now I can focus on other lessons.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm happy for you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. So how have you like I know that like for me when I tune in, I have a specific ritual where I like practice. I don't want to call it ritual, but I call in my team and then I call in the team of the being I work with, which is mostly animals. Um, and then I pray for the highest healing to unfold, and then I literally channel whatever needs to happen, and my handwriting goes to heck, and I can't read what the formula is, and then we tap it in, and then the animals almost, unless they don't have any chi left, which has happened a couple times, the animal gets better.
Right.
We
Right.
haven't figured out how to like up chi yet, so but like then when I'm done, it gets turned off. So how is that process for you in like navigating like the constant influx down to managing it?
So for me, I'm not somebody that has been trained outside of my spirit team, outside of my guide and ancestors. So
Oh,
it's not
awesome.
like I've gotten to go get a certification or anything like that. I have in the past, but my, the deeper that my relationship got with my guides, they're like, yeah, throw that away. We don't want you
Yeah,
working that way.
yeah.
So really, the way I work is it's all about the relationship that I've developed with my spirit team over the last 30 plus years.
Oh, that's awesome.
Or really, yeah, because it started developing even before I knew what it was, right? So, and that's who I rely on for my safety, for the kind of opening and processes and rituals that are used depending on what it is that I'm doing, whether it's that I'm doing a consultation where I'm doing a reading, or whether it's a mediumship reading where I'm connecting with your ancestors, or a healing, right? Like I don't even know sometimes if it's a regular client, they'll be like, I'm booking a time and it might be a reading. And then I feel the energies coming in. And I'm like, oh, this is not going to be a reading, right? Like for me, when I'm doing a healing, I start to profusely sweat. Like my hair is soaked. It could be the middle of winter and I'm like in a sleeveless shirt and it's not menopause. It's like, oh, the healing energies are here versus when I'm doing a reading, I'm very cool. I almost wear a sweater in order to kind of address that. So I would say that um, my guides have taught me a lot when it comes, or they've taught me everything. So how to prepare beforehand. The tradition that I practice is one that very much ties into ritual bathing. So preparing yourself prior to the session and making sure that you clean yourself off after the session, because as a medium, my windows and doors are open
Yeah.
as whatever works through you. And even as a healer, you have that too, right? It might not be messages, but you might get visions, whether you're being directed to
Oh,
do
yeah.
certain things, right? So it's recognizing that and recognizing that not everything that you work with or that you are clearing out is good, obviously, right? And so you want to make sure that you, as that filter that's working through, you keep that as clean as possible. Because I think what a lot of people don't talk about is in this industry, a lot of people get sick over after a certain period of time, right? And I, it's something that I check in with colleagues and other healers and readers. I do a lot of like fairs and shows. Um, and I'm like, what do you do to clean? Oh, I just visualize white light. And I'm like, really? That's it? Like, and everybody's different, right? Like
Yeah.
it's taken me a long time to recognize that just because I need to do it to the extent that I do doesn't mean everybody else does. But I can't help but recognize that everybody seems to have a certain timeline or time that they can do this work, and then they might stop. Very few can go very long, right? And I'm like, okay, well, could it be because we're not necessarily cleansing ourselves, right?
Yeah,
Like
that
we're
makes
waiting,
sense.
right? Like we're wading into the middle of the guk,
Right.
right?
Right. Well, when I'm done with the session, I energetically, call the end of it and I close it out. And then I don't have a label on it. This one is Fragonia, lavender, and frankincense, and that clears the space, like that keeps me protected. And
Yeah.
then this one is um sage, cedar, western cedar specifically, and Palo Santo. And I spray that at the end of the day.
Right.
So everything is clear.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I was guided to make those two, and yeah, it just helps. It's just like an extra step of like cleaning. And in a session that I did with a dog a little while ago, um, the human was doing ghost tours, and
Oh, so the dog was getting everything that they were
dog
picking up.
had cancer right here.
Yeah.
And she was a rescue, so she already had the trauma of being a rescue dog, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
she's like, no, well, he got to me like right after she was diagnosed with cancer, and I'm like
Yeah.
6 months ago would have been better. Anyways,
Yeah.
she ended up transitioning, but she had another month with them, which is cool. And I was able to do 2 sessions, so he was able to hear what to do for future animals. So at one point she comes in the session and she's like, please tell him to clean himself before he comes in the house, because he's bringing in so much energy from those ghost tours and he's not even aware of it. So just sage yourself before you come in the house, please, or some sort of
Yeah.
cleansing smoke or spray or something, because I'm dying here. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, geez. I mean, they've subsequently like had me write an article and do talks about like how we can help them be more supported.
Mhm.
Um, but like that's a basic one, like because they're so used to being like the emotional dump for the humans,
Yeah.
and they can't, because of all the energies that are coming in, they can't do that
Yeah.
anymore. So
My dogs are part of my cleansing routine. So once a week, on top of whatever I do for shows, once a week, my entire family gets it because you can tell, right?
yeah.
If I see my dog, and there's certain signs, every dog is different, but or animal is different, but you can tell the subtle shift. And I was like, so I now use it as a diagnostic tool. Like
Mhm.
aside from the weekly, I'm like, oh, they've picked up something. Okay, let's
Yeah.
go. Let's clear this out, right? So
Oh,
yeah, I think that I wish a little bit more people were aware of that and not from a place of judgment. I think
no.
it's just very much this industry has exploded in the last 10 years. Not that it wasn't around, it was always around,
Right.
but it's very much exploded and come to the forefront. And I think COVID has created this desperate need for people that were in the closet about this, about that sense of connection and purpose and
Yeah.
kind of that greater plan at play.
Yeah.
And so these are just, I see them at shows. They're almost like desperate for anything that has meaning and purpose. And I love that. I think it's
Yeah.
beautiful. I think that we needed to go there, but at the same time, um, people kind of lose a bit of that discernment when
Yeah.
they're in that place. And so they become very susceptible to
Yeah.
things that might not be great for people that might be taking advantage of them. And so it's very much a matter of kind of bringing in that balance in this area as well. But because they're just like drinking from the fire hose of information, sometimes these things, you know, might get lost, or it might that you fall upon that information later when it could have been useful a little bit earlier.
Right. No, discernment is like, that's been like a big thing my team has taught me, because 2021, I had 3 classes all about like getting in touch with my heart. How do I lead through my heart for myself, for my life, with connections with others? And it's gotten to the point where if I don't feel a heart resonance, I can't really make a connection anymore. And
Yeah.
so that's extended, because one of my gifts is I don't have perfect pitch, but I can discern frequencies very, very well.
Mhm.
And if I feel somebody that's like slightly out of tune, for lack of a better way to say it, I can't listen to them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's like all the guru people that are on YouTube
Oh
and
God, yes.
like that. I
Oh,
can't,
God.
I can't. I
Yes.
just can't. And it's like, somebody coming in my field for like 2 minutes or maybe a month, and then all of a sudden, like my frequency will shift and I can't listen to them anymore. And it's just really fascinating, because I'm not even necessarily, I'm conscious of the fact that something has shifted, but I don't know what in my ability to discern the frequency has enabled me to see that I'm shifting something. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
But clearly you are, right? And
Yeah.
I think the uniqueness of the situation that COVID created around the world, whether people were willing or unwilling, they were forced to be still maybe a little bit more than they ever have been. And there was this silence to kind of, and for some people, the very first time that maybe they're hearing that voice within. And if I know what I know of spirit is, you give spirit a crack and it just it just blows everything
Yep.
open, and there's no putting the genie back in the
No,
bottle
no,
when
there
that
is not.
happens, right?
Like,
And I
and
think that
every time you learn something, you can't unlearn it.
that's exactly it. Yeah. And
Oh,
so I think that's what we're seeing with the world right now, right? Is it scary? Absolutely. But is is it something that's shifting and that people are like, hey, this isn't okay anymore? And that is very uncomfortable, that initial stage, right?
oh yeah.
Um, but definitely, I think that that's something that's happening to all of us.
I want to talk a little bit more about that, because like, okay, so I'm living in rural Oregon, and that's most of Oregon actually, but outside of Salem. And I went to a bar to get a burger with a friend of mine a few months ago, and the barkeep had a flower of life on, and he had a quartz crystal, and I was like, that is so cool, because like I wouldn't have expected it. Like a year ago, that would not have existed. Like even 6 months ago, still wouldn't. And I'm like, hey, I like your flower of life. He's like, you know what that is? I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, like I'm not aware of people that don't know, because I don't hang out with people who don't know what it is, but I know there are people that don't know what it is. And I'm like, and I like your quartz crystal too. He's like, yeah, I just got obsessed about this for some reason. I'm like, so cool. And then last week I was at Walmart, and this woman had an amethyst quartz, and she said, yeah, the universe gave me a message. I'm like, what? She said, it whacked against my phone and broke my phone, and I was on the phone too much, and this was the universe's way of taking care of it. And I'm like, I love that, because like she was just like so open to tell me that. And so I'm seeing like people that aren't in the quote unquote spiritual community just like really opening up to
Yeah.
like, oh, this is a possibility. I talked to another guy a couple of weeks ago. He's like, yeah, I think my dog who just died, I think she's still with me. I'm like, she probably is. She's probably checking in on you. And he's like, you think so? And I was like, yes, I do. And he was
Yeah.
like he was so insecure about non 3D. And how are you seeing that show up where you are?
So I'm just outside Toronto, Canada. I'm in a suburb of Toronto. So you can't tell where my Toronto ends and my suburb starts because it's so densely populated in my
Right.
area. Um, I would say, so I had stopped practicing for a few years. I had kind of pulled out. Um, I was dealing with some personal issues at the time, and I'm like, I don't have the space to hold
Yeah.
for people. And I very much went the opposite direction and I delved deep into another business. And so this is where kind of the balance of feelings and business and spirit comes in for me. And so I'm seeing it in two different ways, and it's a interesting contrast. So when I returned to this business, and I returned to it just around COVID, just as COVID was starting. Um, and then when things started to open up again and I did shows, I was absolutely like, my jaw dropped like there was lineups. Like I did a show in last September where there was a 2 hour lineup for the entire duration of the show. So the show
Oh,
started at 4 and it was 9 o'clock. The show ended at 10 and there was still people in line at 9 o'clock to get into the show.
oh,
And I was just like, I was shocked, right? And
yeah,
that I've seen that, not it's not always, but I've seen enough of it that I'm like, okay, this isn't a fluke. Like
that's
something is
cool.
shifting
Yeah,
in the
that's
world.
cool.
The other side that I've seen it where they're reporting kind of more random acts of violence. They're reporting more. It's almost like people are in touch with something that they don't know, and it
Mm,
might be the first time and they're very uncomfortable, and we're seeing kind of these the police here saying we're seeing an increase but we can't correlate it with anything. Normally there's something related, they just not seeing that, right?
mm,
And so I think it ties in very much with the decision that I made in my counseling practice in and around COVID, that I call it culturally appropriate mental health support, because um, I'm Latin myself. I'm part of the Latin American community, and people are very reticent to get any type of mental health support in that community. But they'll go see the local curandera, or they will go see the tarot reader or the astrologer. And I was like, as a social worker, or covered under, I'm a social service worker, but we're covered under the same college. I knew my parameters and I was like, okay, well, we're gonna figure something out that's gonna be able to reach people so that they're not having to hide this element of our lives that for certain people is crucial. And I've been a proponent of therapy. I've been in therapy for many years. The first time I started therapy, I was in my about 19 or 20, but I always had to hide this part of who I was,
mm,
right? And
yeah,
I was like, well, it might niche me a lot, but I don't care, because you can't really get proper help if you can't truly trust and be able to open up to all these elements in your life, number
yeah.
one. And number two, um, what kind of therapist or counselor am I if I'm not creating an environment where you can share everything?
Mm,
Right?
yeah.
How accepted are you going to feel, right? And so, and it's been very refreshing, because when people come across me, they're like, oh my God, this is fantastic. I can't, like, this is so rare to find. And I'm seeing it more and more now. I'm
Yeah.
actually starting to see that combination. But I think that we've been denying people's realities for way too long, right? And I think that there's also something to say about the way our current mental health care system is. There's a lot of people that consider themselves survivors from that system, because like I remember being in school, and we were watching a documentary, and this homeless woman, they were asking her why she was homeless. I don't remember the entire story. She's like, well, where they had me, they were forcing me to take medication for my schizophrenia, and I didn't want to. She's like,
Mm,
I like my voices. They've never told me to do anything bad. They've never told me to hurt myself. I don't want to cut them out of my life. And I'm
right.
thinking, and I remember that very much stuck with me,
Yeah,
because I could relate a little bit to that.
right.
And I said, what would our ancient, or what would our ancestors have thought of somebody that said this?
Yeah.
In certain communities, they would have pulled them aside and said, you have a special gift. and we're going to help you, and we're going to train you, and you're going to become one of the leaders in our community for helping bring these messages forward, right? And now that's not the case, right? And so I think the pendulum has to swing back the other way, where I think both worlds can exist, right? I can take my training and what I understand, and we're sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes we're talking about many of the same things. We just have different names for them, or
Right.
the origin of might be different, but the effects and how it shows up in people's lives are very similar,
Yeah,
right?
I completely agree with that because like we have these innate gifts that society has given us the opportunity to ignore them. I'll say that's the nicest way I could put that. In the pursuit of third dimensional constructs that, we've been taught since we were little are important. Well, I get
I
it.
think that's a very kind take that you're
Thank you.
giving there.
I heard that. I was like, no, you're gonna say that nicely. Um, like, had I had I paid attention to how animals were responding to me when I was little, which I mean I did, but I didn't know, I didn't want to cut an animal open. I almost passed out when I had to cut a frog open in biology class. Like that's not, no, don't want to do that. That feels icky. Um, but energy, yeah, hands down energy. I love doing that. Like I had a sheep last week who, when I was complete with her, she gifted me with the most gentle, open love. It was like Kuan Yin level of gentle love, and I
Oh,
cried.
that's awesome.
It was
Yeah.
so beautiful. If you told my 10-year-old self that, she would have been all over that. If you told my 25-year-old that, she would have been like, what the hell are you talking about?
Wrong with you.
Right, what's wrong with you, you crazy woman? Because like I knew, like in my family, my dad's mom and my mom's dad were both institutionalized. My mom's dad had a nervous breakdown and got a lobotomy.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah,
Okay.
it was hard. And I never met him.
So your gifts sound like they're ancestral.
Oh yeah, they're
Maybe you might be the
totally
first time
ancestral.
that they understood it. Yeah.
Totally ancestral. And my grandma Reesberg tried to kill herself because she took care of 6 people that died on her, and she couldn't take it. And I totally get that. Total empath, total like,
Who wouldn't get it, right? But
yeah. And so
instead, right
she,
now, we're like, it's suppression, here's pills. And it's like, it's clearly situational,
right,
right? Yeah.
right. So like, but she, like after my grandpa died, she, like until the day she died, he was with her every day. He was with me often. He's not visiting me very much anymore, but like he constantly checking on, me. The day she died, she was going like this, reaching up because he was reaching down to get her. And I saw when she passed, he picked her up and swirls her in a dance, and they just danced across the universe together. And I was like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. Because I haven't really felt him since then. Because he's with her again, and that was her love. So she was always connected to him. Never talked about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did you have
Imagine the wisdom. Imagine the wisdom that could have been passed down if they had talked about it, right?
nice? Would have been nice. Like my grandpa Craver would have been like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
empath, um, like ceramic, like master ceramic guy. He painted the china by hand back in the day, like that kind of creativity and openness to the divine. And like I'm I'm like just tuning in. Okay, he's back on the planet this time. He's actually being able to explore more, but like having that lineage, and you must have had that lineage in your family too.
I do. It's just not talked about. Like I recognize it now. I recognize it now. And
Yeah.
like I can kind of pick through family stories and I was like, oh, this is what this is. Is it acknowledged? No. But I think for me, definitely when I started to connect with my ancestry and when I started to invite my ancestors into my practice, that was an absolute game changer for me. Like that was my life before and my life after
Oh,
kind of
wow.
moment with how, and I'm an evangelist now when it comes to incorporating your ancestors into your practice, because you don't have a stronger, bigger, better protection, backup team, resources that can help than your ancestors, because they are the closest to you. You then
Yeah,
have your guides, you have deities, saints, and universe, and it just kind of goes out from there. But
right.
these people all have a lot of demands, requests, things going on. Your ancestors, they're in your blood. They're right there, close with you. So definitely they've, once I started paying attention, they absolutely kicked in, not only spiritually, but I started finding these like really cool Easter eggs throughout my story and my family, and kind of recognizing where and what it was like and where it came from. So definitely my psychic mediumship skills, that comes from my father's side, even though my mother's side is extremely intuitive, but it's more the healing side that comes from my mom's side. So that combination, I'm very grateful for that
Yeah,
combination. But if there's anything that I can, I just always have to take this opportunity when I have a little bit of an audience. If there's anything that I can stress, highly stress to listeners, is please bring in your ancestors into any spiritual work that you do, because it really, it's like a power up in your video game. And I say that respectfully.
yeah, yeah. I totally feel that. Have you been able, since you've been doing this, have any other family members that are currently in the 3D opened
No,
up about it? No,
no,
really? Do you make them
no,
uncomfortable?
I, yeah, I think I make them uncomfortable. I think definitely, um, I have come in with the ancestral purpose of no more secrets,
Hmm.
no more lies, no more masks. And that's a very challenge, like people can say that,
Yeah,
right? People say that all the time,
right, right.
but living that is a very, that can be very challenging for a lot of people.
Yeah,
And it's taken me a very long time to be like, okay, no problem. That's your issue. That's not mine. And I'm
right,
gonna,
right.
this is how I'm gonna choose to continue to live my life.
Mhm.
So, and I think as a medium, that's a challenge as well, because it's very difficult to lie to me. Where as a friend, I'm like, something's up.
Yeah.
No, everything's fine. I'm like, no, everything is not fine. I don't know what's up, but something's up, right? My partner can't throw surprise parties for me if he comes up with ideas. I'm always like, oh, I know something, So definitely, that makes life in general challenging. And then when it comes to my practice and when I'm doing readings or consults, that also means that I'm not everybody's cup of tea for
Right.
that, right? Depending on in this space, a lot of people go get some type of intuitive help, looking to confirm what they want to believe.
Right, right.
And the rub here is that when you really live from that intuitive space, whether it's in business, whether it's in life or whatever, you got to get really used to hearing what you don't want to hear, right? Because that's usually the case. And
Yeah.
I say that as a medium because like I hear voices, so understand that for me it's very easy
Mhm.
to convince myself of what I want to hear. And so it requires a very persistent and consistent um, ritual practice and kind of safeties in my life to constantly be knocking my ego off.
Mhm.
Constant. And I'm like, it's a constant fight. Like, don't get me wrong, I have as much ego as everybody else, but I recognize that I have it. And I'm like, okay, is this my ego or is this me? It's very easy for me to do for other people, right? Because
Right.
I don't have skin in that game, right?
Mhm.
But in my own life, I'm still facing the same challenges that everybody else does, right?
Get it. I get it because like, one of the things I have a tendency, I'm studying the Chinese meridians and the five elements, and my wheelhouse, my favorite space to be is in the water and like the snuggle spot and the self-isolation and I'm being guided to be more social and to interact with people more. And I'm like, all right, but it's summer, I guess I could do that. But like I love
Yes,
the
like
snuggle spot. And like so when like two of my girlfriends who are both intuitive this week said, you need to do more posts. You need to do posts daily, either a video of yourself or a client testimony or something.
yeah.
I don't like social media.
Me neither. I hear you, girl. I
And
absolutely hear you. It's a constant. They're like
but
videos, do that. And I'm like, no.
I
I'll
know,
do a
so it's like
podcast.
so I know for a fact that like me being, no, I don't really need to do that is totally my programming of like leave me alone. I just want to be, like I'm happy to do the podcast. My promotion of it is very minimal. Because I just don't do social media. So I do it and like my team's just like, do it more, do it
Yeah,
more. And I'm like,
I get the same.
yeah, so it's like that, and so I know that that's the part that isn't me, because the me part is the no, I just want to be left alone.
Give me my dogs, give me some Netflix, and let me recharge my batteries by myself, right? Yeah, I
How
hear
do you
you.
find that balance, since you mentioned like a little self-care? How do you find that balance of like, do you have quiet time, or are
Absolutely.
you okay?
Yeah, I absolutely do. My guides are merciless with that. So for example, I can never, the business side of me struggles with this because I can never aim to do 8 hours a day of readings 5 days a week. They're like, you can't, that's just not how you're going to work. Right. So I'm very diversified in my business ventures. It's all around what I love, spirituality, helping people. But um, I have a limit where my spirits are like, you can read 2 weeks out of the month. However, that splits up, but that's your max. Right. I've been at shows where, like I said, I have a wait list app. That's how busy the shows were at one point. The economy's hit a little bit harder the last little bit, but like I had a wait list app where you would come and sign up and you'd get a text message 10 minutes before your reading was up and people would come back to the booth. And I've done shows where I've read 22 people straight in an afternoon, right?
Oh, wow.
So and again, and I remember one time I'm like, I actually had to recover. I had to go get a special healing because it was too much, right? And that's where my spirits are like they were just like, you cannot do this. This is not, do not, this isn't how you fit this into the 3D,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's not a 9 to 5 job, right?
Oh,
So
and
I make products. I do business coaching for spiritual business owners. I have a joint company with my partner where we do very similar sprays to kind of what you shared, but they're ritual room sprays. So they're from the spagyrics tradition of alchemy and from the Western magical kind of sciences. So
oh, cool.
yeah, so depending on the herb, there's a particular astrological timing for that herb.
Mhm.
They're made in ritual, so we get the biggest sense. And so anyway, so there's different lines of things
Yeah,
that we have
yeah.
because I have to adjust to the particulars, right? This isn't, our gifts are not a commodity that is to be exploited the way that traditional business practices might think, that you're kind of like dance monkey dance, and that's just not how it is, right?
No, I totally agree with that. At one
And so
point,
yeah, sorry, that was a really
no,
roundabout
you're
way. So
good.
like self-care is, so I a lot of ritual bathing, clearings once a week minimum. I also have every morning for about an hour, I sit with spirit, prayer, meditation. I get my to-do list from spirit for the day, both from a spiritual, energetic perspective and from a business perspective. Um, a lot of I don't want to say reactive, but if it's like 11 at night and they're like, you got to go do this. You got to go do this right now. Right. And my husband will be like groaning and I'll be like, I'll be back. I'll be back. I have like car keys in my hand. I'm like, I'm just going to go out for like 5 minutes. I just got to go, you know, pick a leaf from a tree and I'll be right back type of thing.
Yeah,
And he's like, this is so annoying. And I'm like, I know, because it doesn't fit the 3D model, but
I
you know, that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, I completely agree with it. It's so fascinating because like I typically well, prior to this month, I was doing way too many podcasts and I'm also the producer. So I got burnout. So I took May off.
Absolutely.
Um, I was guided to like have certain time frames so I don't do podcasts every single day. Because, and I can tell this is with you, it's active listening.
Mhm, mhm.
And
Yeah,
that requires energy. And so typically, and today it was interesting because I had a podcast at one, I was guided to meditate and I went deep. I set the alarm because it was like really deep and I'm like, wow, okay. And they're like, just do that in between every podcast, just do that. And I'm like, okay, does that mean I'm gonna actually like have social skills afterwards? And they're like, just do it. Just like we're not telling you anything, just do it. And I'm like, okay. Because like that's another level of care that they're bringing in for me
yeah.
that I just hadn't thought of before. And they're like, nope. And like yesterday, this is crazy. This is really crazy. Like the energy shifts. So my tendency is to distract myself on my phone. Yesterday, anytime I tried to go online in any format, laptop or phone, within 15 minutes, I was told to get off and do something else.
Or
And I'm
they'll
like,
start to interrupt the signal so you actually can't get to do anything productive.
they didn't even do that. They're just like, put it down.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. Meditate. Okay. Food prep. Okay. Go outside and ground. Okay.
Yeah,
Water the garden. Okay. Like it was just like, you're going to be doing all these things. You don't have time for this anymore.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is so, and it's just like post eclipse, solstice and full
It
moon.
was brutal energy. Everybody that I spoke to, they were recovering from some
Mhm.
part of that. So, yeah, I would say very similar. Where I would tell people something that you can learn to bridge so that your intuition isn't just a passive experience, but it is an active one where you can engage in it as well, is setting time for you to hear them before they're like, don't walk in that direction. Right, like,
Right.
sometimes the passiveness happens when you're just engaging in life, and then so all of a sudden it's like, a life or death. Don't walk across the street right
Right.
now.
Right.
And we all can, everybody can speak to that type of intuition, but I think a more sophisticated, or more, I want to say sophisticated, that's the wrong word, but like a more interactive and evolved kind of way of working with it is where you're actively engaging it. Hey, what should I be doing today? How
Mhm.
can I serve today? Where do you need me? Is there anything? And for me, when my guides don't say anything, I'm like, whoa, day off. I can do whatever I want, right? Because some days it's a huge list that I have,
Yeah.
right? And so you kind of start to learn that. But I would say too, especially as a woman, but I think this applies to anyone, and I recommend this a lot in my business coaching, is learn what your seasons are, because
Mm.
we're not all meant to be on. Just like they said, you're going to work 2 weeks out of the month as a medium. Otherwise than that, we don't want you doing that. There's recovery time, things of that nature. If you want a prolonged experience and to be able to do this work over the long term. But recognizing what's your season when you're awakened and you have energy and you can go, go, go. And then you have other seasons where everyday life is a bit of a drag and you're like dragging yourself a bit, right? Or there's seasons where you might cocoon and you might just stay quiet for a bit as you replenish. And then you start to feel the implantation of some kind of bits of ideas that kind of work. And as you get older, you recognize that, right? When you're younger, you might not be paying as close of
Right.
attention, but there reaches a point where you're like, oh, summer's my time, right? I come alive, and then until the witchy season. And then come the winter, I like to stay, you recognize that.
Yeah.
And then when you start to incorporate that into your planning, into your business, and into your life, and how you show up, you're going with the tide instead of working against it. And that just becomes so much easier.
That makes so much sense because you know, and it's also like I'll go past seasonal, like daily for me. Like there are mornings where I'm like, all right, it's like 6 o'clock. I'm gonna like meditate and I'm just gonna go do the things. And then other days I'm like, I think I'm gonna sleep into like 8 or 9
Yeah,
or 10 if I can. And it's because like something like this weekend, like Thursday
yeah,
through Sunday, I could not get out of bed at a like any reasonable time because there was so much energy coming through. I was up 4 hours on Saturday, like between like 1 and 5, just feeling the energies.
yeah.
And I just fell back asleep till like 9:30 because I just couldn't do it.
And the more you become comfortable with acknowledging that and living that, the better your life is. But we're sometimes so riddled with guilt by conditioning, by family expectations, by societal, kind of certain regiments that are set in place that
Right,
we think, oh, we got to do that. And it's like, well, what's the difference? If I'm waking up if you don't have anything else, right? That's the other thing.
right,
If you're
right,
not like schlepping off other responsibilities that you have.
right, right,
But if you wake up at 10, but you go to bed at 2, it's the same amount of hours that
right,
you're putting into work there.
right.
It's just a little bit different. So, our rhythms are very personal, and it's important that we honor those, whatever that looks like.
I agree. Mm. Just tuning in if there's anything else that is a deep question wants to come through. This is an interesting question. Aside from your bathing, what is your favorite daily practice for self-care?
Aside from what, I'm sorry.
Your cleansing ritual?
So it's my 45 to an hour start of the day ritual with my spirits. It
Right.
is where I get grounded. I believe, you know, grounding is probably the most misunderstood and most needed element in this space.
Mhm.
The majority of the people that I see are not grounded. And so I'm always like, come, let's bring it back in, right?
Mhm.
But it grounds me, it focuses me, it gives me the peace that I'm looking for. Because I've
Mhm.
really reached a stage in my life where it's very much like, does this bring me peace? Yes or no? If it's a
Mhm.
no, then and I have the ability to choose, right? Like my taxes don't bring me peace, but I don't have a choice in that, right?
Right, right.
So if it's something that I can choose and I recognize that it doesn't bring me peace, then that does not stay in my life. And it really is something that just becoming really conscious, I think, of what I allow into my life has been an enormous amount of self-care. Prayer is huge. I'm not a great meditator. I will, but it's still, my ADHD has me shaking a leg, scratching an eyebrow, moving my hair. And
Right.
so that is challenging, but prayer is something that I very much grew up with and is something that I easily do. And it is a little known that prayer can raise and increase your chi just as much as meditation can, right? Because you're still in that state of grace.
Yeah.
And so for those, frustrated meditators out there, there are other ways, right? And sometimes it's moving meditation, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's that walk in nature.
Yep.
Everybody kind of has to find what that rhythm is for them. But yeah, definitely I would say that that is something that if you were to look at of the 365 days, I probably miss maybe 20 a year. And that's usually because I'm sick, or if it's like some really early event. And even that, I'm trying to
Yeah.
honor that in some way. Yeah.
Mm, I love that. Mm. Well, I'm going to ask the final question, and you know what it is. But how do people
You
find
told
you?
me and I forgot, so I
How
apologize.
do people find you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So my website is curandera, CURANDERA.ca. You'll be able to find my spirit workings, my counseling practice, speaking opportunities. I don't do social media great. I am on Instagram though, and it's the same thing, curandera.ca. I'm trying.
I
But
understand.
yeah. But that's the best way to find me.
Sister, thank you so much for this awesome conversation.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time, Sophia.
I love your beingness. I love your light. I love your energy. And I'm so grateful that you're doing the work in the world that you're doing.
Thanks, you too. You too. Those animals need you.
Thank you.